welcome everyone to this webinar about regenerative communities. My name is Marcus Heining and I'll be your facilitator today. I'm very excited about this webinar because we have two amazing speakers and two really great topics, which will look at regenerative communities from two very different perspectives. So it's going to be a really interesting one. It's also the first one that we're doing on Google Meets. We'll do it as best as we can. So we didn't manage to find a sponsor for this webinar. In the CPD form, we will ask you if you have any ideas or for companies that can sponsor this event. It's a small amount that allows us to do the CPD validation. So if we're missing out on sponsors a lot, we won't be able to give CPD points for this event anymore. So if you have an idea, drop it in the chat or send us an email. And this is just an overview of all the great webinars we did last year, and these are the ones that we've been doing this year, and we are trying to record them and make them available afterwards for you to watch as well. And so we are also asking you to, if you have a little bit of extra time and you're very good at either organizing webinars or creating awareness around regenerative design or social media, and you want to come and join us at the Regenerative Collaborative, just let us know. We can use all the help. So then also, if you have an idea for a topic that you want to see discussed at one of these webinars, fill out the form. I'll show you later what we have on the agenda for the rest of the year. And today we really want to dive into regenerative communities. And we have, first up, as we've got two speakers today. And as I mentioned before, there's going to be like two very different perspectives of regenerative communities. And we're going to see it from a more design point of view. How do we design for regenerative communities from Alastair Rendall? And then we're going to have a very practical implementation from Romy Stander. So just to introduce Alastair. So Alastair is a founding partner of ARG Design and has a background in architecture, city planning and urban design. ARG Design is an architectural firm that focuses on mainstreaming regenerative design and development throughout the built environment, which is obviously very much in alignment with what we're trying to advocate here on this platform. The company has completed many award-winning architectural and urban design projects over the years, and today Alastair will be talking about regenerative thinking at the urban scale across Africa. And before I give the mic to him, I just want to introduce Romy as well. Romy is a director and co-founder of the NGO Water for the Future. Romy's background is in interior design, delivering interior design projects for large companies. But in 2016, she changed her focus to create a more holistic approach towards remediation of the Jukskei River as part of the NGO Water for the Future. And that's the project she's going to be talking about today about us. So that's talking about rehabilitation of the upper Jukskei River through community participation, green technology and enterprise development. So as I say, two very different topics, but I think they're going to give us a really nice perspective of what regenerative communities can be.
Perhaps should I proceed?
Yes.
First of all, apologies for I got the title wrong there. Regenerative Collaborative. It should have been not Regenerative Communities. But anyway, it's related. So and our topic is about creating regenerative communities. So thank you very much for the opportunity to share this with you all today. As I think we will discover in the process, we're looking at kind of very different scales of interventions and initiatives between myself and Romy, but there will be many touch points that I think might be common across them. What I'm going to be presenting is a proposed new extension to the city of Cape Town, which is of massive proportion. Immediately that makes, I think, a lot of environmentalists and people concerned about regenerative and all of that, their hair stand on end. But we're coming at it from the perspective of what is the need? on our continent, as well as within our various cities, and in this specific instance, the city of Cape Town, which I'm going to use as the example to portray how we're thinking about city making across the continent. So the project is called Milkwood. We're, and I say we, through ARG Design and Africa 123, which my partner Gita, who is also on the call today, are part of creating Africa 123. So it's an initiative to intervene in or to propose quite large-scale city-level development and thinking across the continent. And each of the projects that we're involved with is named after an indigenous local tree. And you can read the quote for yourself that Wangari Maathai quoted when receiving her Nobel Peace Prize. The milkwood tree symbolizes wholeness and bringing a deep sense of connection, belonging, and healing. So that's really the motivation. That's where we're coming from in proposing this, and constantly having to resolve just the massiveness of the scale of this with that, that deep heart sense of each and every human being who's going to be engaged in it at some level or another. You're familiar with where Cape Town is. This is an international presentation, so let's move on. So the project, it's about establishing an economy, an overall economy. And by economy, we're talking about a natural economy as well as a social economy and a monetary economy. So it's all things combined. And it's not just a housing project, because our failing in this country in particular, which has been perpetuated since 1994, is just the amount of suburban dormitory suburb housing that has gone on has been completely unsustainable and completely non-regenerative, as I think we all know. So South Africa needs 2.3 million homes. The Greater Cape Town is plus 600,000 plus. Milkwood would be a catalyst project for South Africa in general because of the scale of the investment in it. It'll be 300 billion rands, over R1 trillion, actually going to be invested into it. It will initiate a regenerative circular economic system. It will provide community development opportunity at a huge scale, completely different from the way in which townships were done in the past. And will be able to provide a cutting-edge sustainable settlement because it's one whole space, approximately 3,000 hectares. So you can tackle all of the regenerative systems, engineering systems, natural systems, and social systems at scale. It's likely to be the flagship of Africa 123 across the continent. That just speaks to the need in Cape Town at the moment. So although Milkwood would be in the order of 200,000 houses, that doesn't even get close to the backlog, never mind what the city is going to have to deliver in the next 30 to 40 years. And the mayor in February this year indicated that the city is likely to double in size from 5 million to 10 million people in a generation, and a generation is usually regarded as 25 years, which is in fact the lifespan of this Milkwood project. So a lot of people are critical of us, saying that we shouldn't be creating such big scale projects, but that it only would fulfill 1/3 of the backlog if one were to be simplistic about it. Anton Bradell has also said, he's the MEC for Environment in the Western Cape, that we need a new city the size of Bloemfontein immediately, never mind to handle the future population increase that's taking place in Cape Town already. So the key features are, as I've already said, it will provide a new approach to large-scale development, jobs being at the core of it. If we're talking regenerative, we have to talk about people's ability to sustain themselves. And by jobs, it doesn't mean handout jobs, created by other people. It's all manner of income generation, of people being able to sustain themselves. It would not be providing free houses. We're not expecting any subsidies from the government. If we do get them, good and well. And it provides a real asset for everyone. It's my view that a lot of the township housing that we've developed over the last almost 30 years, the actual asset value is 10 to 25% of the actual cost, the original cost of those houses. And that's just no way to be, developing into the future, because that really isn't providing people with a real asset for which they can move forward and bequeath to their families and so forth. It's also the intention that it builds community at each and every step, and there will be engagements and involvements all the way along, and includes health, education, green infrastructure, every step of the way, as I mentioned already. And it also will be assisting to de-densify some of the very, very dense informal settlements in Cape Town and provide an aspirational environment in which to live. This is one of my favorite diagrams produced by Ivan Turok from the CSIR. The skyscrapers that you can see are the dense areas. So you can see Kailicha, Nyanga, Wallerstein, Luandle, and all of that. Those are the most dense areas. A lot of planners in Cape Town talk about densification. Densification is what we need to do in the city, but actually what we're needing to do is rearrange the density in the city of Cape Town, not talk blandly about densification. Clearly the green areas, the leafy suburbs, etc., that's where densification needs to happen, and it is happening apace, but it's not happening at anything like the scale that that is required to handle the backlog or the future needs of the city. The space between Tableview and Atlantis that you can see on the diagram there, that's the space within which the Milkwood city will be located, the Milkwood development will be located. So that's a diagram, that's the 3,000 hectares, and that gives you a summary of all of the features of the development. Essentially, it'll be part of creating a corridor along the N7, which will help to link Atlantis back to the city of Cape Town. Atlantis has long been the stepchild of one of the stepchilds of Cape Town, and a really failed experiment in a separate industrial development, and really needs to be reconnected back. It'll be connected via MyCity BRT bus route, which is already close by at Dunoon, and Atlantis is already served by MyCity, but it goes along the coast road instead of through this what will potentially be this dense corridor. That's just a snapshot of, obviously it looks very, very big in the foreground because the rest of the city is far away in perspective. But you see the N7 comes up the left-hand side of the picture. You see a Robben Island out in the sea and Table Mountain in the background. So it's the land is essentially one watershed. So all of the water that flows into it just from the top edge flows down through one exit point. And so it basically forms one watershed, which makes the management of the whole water systems quite an exciting opportunity. And we've got lots of ideas about how that could be managed. It will obviously entail a disruption to the existing natural drainage patterns and systems because it's a very dry area. The mean annual rainfall is less than 400 millimeters. So it's much drier even than back in Cape Town, just 20 kilometers away. So the approach that we take is what we call a smarter approach, a sustainable, modern agri-aquaculture, renewable technology economy, and urban. By urban, we means we can't just be thinking about urban all the time. We've got to be thinking about how we connect with the rural hinterland, both from a productive point of view as well as from a natural systems point of view. And then our community grow approach, which I'll mention to you in a moment, deals with economy, homes, education, healthcare, regenerative, and governance. All of those, we call them our 6 pillars, join together to form this cohesive regenerative system approach. So it's this, as I said, a shift from business as usual to a regenerative approach, establishing the foundations for communities that are socially, economically, environmentally, politically, technologically sustainable, and promoting urban livability and creating inclusive urban environments through participatory strategies and opportunities for a full spectrum of urban society. So this is the vision of Milkwood, and it obviously is going to be happening at scale. And critical to it is care for people and planet, a selfless and ego-free interaction, and the freedom to align for the greater good. So this is, yes, it has to happen at a large developer kind of scale, but that this is development with the heart, not just a profit-orientated development. So our approach is basically indicated by the way in which this little logo works. So first of all, the economy and the homes, education, healthcare, governance, and regenerative. So the whole 6 pillars bind together in a way, and if you can step back, you can see that it's also people holding hands and their heads being the different blobs around it. I really love this logo. It talks about the way in which all of these systems need to integrate, and we have the opportunity in this at the scale, and given that we're planning it from scratch, to be able to bind all of those together in the in the most beneficial way. So we're into the planning phase at the moment, securing the land, getting the funding, and then we'll be moving into the master planning and rezoning and EIA. I'll show you our thinking so far. So that's the Milkwood piece of land, Atlantis just to the north of the picture there, with the Dussenberg small holdings just almost immediately to the north. And then to the west is the Coburg Power Station, nuclear power station. You can see the blue line is the little river. It's called the Soutrivier. The water on the site is brakwater. In fact, one of the farms that occupies that land is called Brakkekale. So it's always been brakwater, so it's not very good for agricultural purposes. In case you're thinking that we're chewing up valuable agricultural land, we're not, because it's not very productive at all. And then on the right, you can see what we're calling the Western Corridor. The idea that from Dunoon in the south, that's where Tableview, etc., is, up to Atlantis in the north alongside the N7. It's an ideal opportunity. The city has already planned to have a road called the M12 that would go up through the center of the development, and that is what would carry the BRT bus route connecting Dunoon through to Atlantis. Those of you who know Cape Town will know that the BRT bus already terminates currently at Dunoon. There's also a terminus in Atlantis, and it's really a question of joining the dots. Milkwood sits at the center of that to unlock that whole opportunity. There are just three other landowners that own land between Dunoon and Milkwood, and that is the City of Cape Town, Garden Cities, and Communicare, all of which are in the business of affordable housing, which is great, so that we can coordinate with them. So we've done some initial thinking, to create sustainable neighborhoods and communities at this huge urban scale, we're talking about essentially a normative pattern. So we work on a 300 by 300 walkable neighborhood, which would contain, your basic primary school and, somewhere between 1,000 and 1,500 households. That would then be slotted into a bigger block. So there are 4 of those that make up the 600 by 600. Which contains somewhere, depending on the density, depending on where it's located in the overall settlement, between 6,000 and 10,000 households. And the diagram there indicates how those 4 come together. And then the next slide would 1,200 by 1,200 with the next level of the urban village. And obviously at this scale, you start getting much higher facilities up the hierarchy in the form of possibly hospitals or large clinics or shopping centers and things like that, as opposed to the local scale little corner shops and primary schools and ECDs or early childhood development centers, etc. So there are different scales of community facilities that find themselves in the different nodes according to the scale at which you're developing here. And the final one would be the urban quarter, which is your 2.4 by 2.4 kilometers per urban quarter. And there'll be about 2.5 of these would make up the whole of Milkwood. Obviously, this is a generic and normative pattern, and it'll obviously be warped and bent and twisted and so on to find itself on the site to accord with the natural systems and the topography, the climatic conditions, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a very exciting process that we're going through. Homes obviously form one of the core ingredients of the whole development. And as I say, we see that as a place of shelter, safety, and an investment in financial security. So it's not just the shelter and safety. We have to be looking at the long-term economic sustainability of the community. In broad terms, there's 4 basic categories. Obviously, this will be broken down into many, many, many more categories as we go forward. But starting at the lower end would be what would normally be subsidized housing. In fact, it'll be subsidized by the development. That's why we've got the word subsidized. It won't be government subsidy. So the land will be free. So the land will be paid for by the rest of the development in order to enable your lowest income people to come into the development. And that's literally those who would currently qualify for an RDP house. And they would be provided with a job and be able to afford to live in the community. And that's in the order of 46,000 units. The next step up would be the gap housing, 63,000 units. The next level would be 50,000 units of townhouses, and then by freestanding, it might be semi-detached as well, about 40,000 of those. So in the order of just over 200,000 units, and we've worked out there's a whole financial spreadsheet and model that goes together with this, with all the income streams and so forth. So it's really a very, very massive undertaking. But that just gives you a snapshot of the categories, and these these are done in US dollars because we just recently made a presentation to Canadian investors. So don't worry about that. You've already seen the prices on the previous slide. Yeah, and as I emphasized, service land for the social housing element at no cost. And then there would be subsidies into health, education, and electricity, so that everyone who lives in the community is actually able to access the same level of health and education facilities. So it's not like the poor people have to go off somewhere else to find a cheap clinic or whatever. They would be able to access the same level of services as everyone else, purely because of the enormous scale at which this development is being done. Yeah. Regenerative ecology is obviously central to our approach. What we mean by that is that basically there's either zero impact or even a positive impact coming out of the natural systems. Always use the example of Johannesburg. It used to be, a high-veld, bushveld environment, and currently if you look at it from a satellite, it actually shows up as a tropical forest, and that's purely because of the amount of water that has been pumped into the system and used to water gardens and grow trees and all of those sorts of things. So yes, this will definitely have an impact on and change the natural environment in which it's located. It'll probably result in bringing down the temperatures, making the land and soil much richer, and growing, trees and plants in a much more lush way than it is at the moment. Because as I said, it's a current rainfall is about 400 millimeters a year, which is really relatively low and doesn't really sustain much in the way of a natural system. So we're very conscious of the impact that this development will be having, and making sure that that'll have a positive impact and not a degrading or negative impact on it. We do have some arguments with our freshwater ecologist friends who would rather see the Soterfeer stay exactly as it is. But that's a separate debate, which maybe there was questions from the audience today about that. I think this is very much common cause from all of us, who, given the nature of the people interested in the seminar today. But our current system is huge amounts of inputs and huge amounts of outputs and very little recycling or anything. And these are obviously what we're wanting to avoid happening, and contrast that with the next one, which is fewer inputs if we possibly can. There's a lot of waste that happens in our systems. Obviously recycling and both water and solid waste, both organic and inorganic, and using those in different ways, whether it be for energy generation or for composting, etc. And critically, the recycling of water. Water is the single biggest throughput in any city. It's just tons and tons and tons and tons and tons of water churning through the city every single day and not being used properly and just flowing out into the sea. And given particularly Cape Town and South Africa in general is water stressed, but Cape Town in particular is very water stressed, and this will be a major focus of the design of the systems within the city. And then wanting to absolutely minimize all of the negative outputs clearly, and wanting to generate lots of positive outputs. We're emphasizing the 6-pillar model and education being one of the key ones in it, because what we often find in our township developments is that a whole lot of houses get put down, and maybe 20 years later the school arrives. Western Cape has done a little better at it recently, but yeah, the education is critical to it, and whether it be government education or private education, as I said before, we would be ensuring that everyone has access to the same quality of education through this whole, through the whole development, because it will form part and parcel of the development. In particular, what you see in the conventional or the status quo is that not enough attention is paid to early childhood care and early childhood development, whereas the community grow model really looks at building right from early age and early stage in life, and making sure that adequate facilities and care is taken for the children in the community, such that they can rise all the way up through the secondary, tertiary, and university, other systems of education, and for that matter, ongoing adult education as well. So it'll be very much a culture of the community that we're hoping to engender. That education be very much part of it, and that the environment itself be an educative one for everyone. We expect lots of people to be coming and visiting and looking at it over the years as well. And health or healthcare is also one of those fundamentals. And here, albeit that we put a cross there because it's just the kind of conventional symbol for health, actually what we're more focused on is preventative health and living healthy lifestyles, so that, again, the conventional thing is much more curative, your primary healthcare, your community healthcare, and your hospitals and so forth, and relatively little emphasis is paid to preventing people from getting sick and in the first place, and having them be well and eat well and have healthy lifestyles and so forth. So a lot of emphasis will be paid on that, and as the development develops in stages. Well, obviously the build phase, we're not going to go into this in great detail now, but let's carry on. I think we're all probably built environment people, so we kind of understand how these things roll out, and we're talking about a process running all the way through to 2047, where we get gradually more and more sophisticated economy being built, and more homes, and a kind of more and more developed community as we go forward. The big challenge here is how do you somehow replicate an organic development of a community, like whether it be your Italian hill towns or your nice little villages in South America or in India somewhere, where the community develops and get to know one another. There's the glue that holds the whole thing together. How do you replicate that at this scale in a compressed time frame? And that's going to be one of our primary focal points, and there's sufficient budget put aside in the development to actually really focus on that community development aspect, given all the experience that Gita and I have had over 40 years of engagement in precisely those sorts of endeavors. Next. This just shows there's an initial concept as to how the phasing of the development might work, probably about 7 phases, starting from the south and moving up towards the north, taking into consideration what how the lie of the land, and where we need different kinds of things. There's a railway line to the western side, so you can see there's a station marked on the side there, which will only be needed later in the development. We'll rely on the BRT initially. And this diagram is just intended, it's kind of a spiral diagram, or meant to indicate a kind of evolving community over time. Right through from 2026 through 2024, 27, whatever, where all of the different aspects of the community develop and become more sophisticated and more integrated as we go forward. From a jobs point of view, the overview then would be approximately 800,000 population, 200,000 homes, regenerative ecology, retail, commercial, light industrial, there's public open spaces throughout. Approximately 1,000 of the 3,000 hectares would be public open space and streets and so forth. So yeah, a very high proportion. Because we're going relatively high density, we can have a lot of open space and amenities and so forth. And the circular economy, as I said at the beginning, the economy is critical. We're addressing it towards the end here because it forms the basis for it, but it forms the platform to earn a livelihood and contribute to society. So there's the 6 pillars, as we mentioned, starting off with the homes, and that generates, when you build a home, you have to have the materials. So we create a factory to make the materials. You have to have people who can build those homes and put them together, right from digging the trenches through to finishing all of the aspects of a house. So there are many, many, many different components that come together. And given the scale at which this development will be taking place, you're actually able to create sustainable businesses that last the entire 20 years and look like and be able to then shift into maintenance and upgrades and renovations and so on after the 20 years as well. But we're not relying only on the construction economy, obviously. The construction is where it starts, and then it evolves and becomes more and more integrated and diverse as one goes forward in time. And critically, as you can see, the cap on the top there is a community development trust, which will mean that the residents of the area are engaged and have a say all the way through, as well as obviously being able to elect their representatives within the city governance, because it will be integrated into the city as a whole. Again, I think this is probably a fairly familiar kind of diagram to all of you, but planet, purpose, partnerships, prosperity, people, looking at all of the different aspects of a regenerative economy, that they all play into one another. Like in nature, there's no such thing as waste. You know, one process's offshoots becomes the generator or the fuel for the next process, etc. So we'll be looking at each and every one of the multitude of processes within the overall development as to how can that benefit the next process? How can we spin that out into something else so that nothing is wasted? And again, the big benefit is that we're not having to tie into existing city systems. This will be pretty much freestanding because it's separate from all of the current infrastructure in the city. Obviously, the critical piece that we will have, or input that we'll have to get is water. And that will either have to come from desalination or from the city's existing water systems, but we anticipate being able to recycle more than 50% of the water that comes in. So we'd be reducing the demand on the overall system, or overall water supply system. Yeah, I'm not going to go into this in great detail, but obviously in any economy, there are different magnets or different kind of groupings of businesses, groupings of things that come together. And we've had urban econ, who are urban economy analysts, look at all of the different opportunities in Cape Town. It's very exciting to see that there's currently within the green economy in particular, the digital economy, education, etc. There's a lot of stuff that's developing in Cape Town that this will be able to take advantage of. So we expect that a lot of businesses will be able to be generated out of that. And that is obviously a challenge because, you know, creating basically a whole new economy out there has to piggyback on some of the stuff that's already happening. Then just the jobs. This is a rough overview, but typical of a cross-section of the type of economy. Yeah, more and more jobs in different sectors of the economy, obviously evolving over time until the development is fully realized. Clearly, we don't expect everyone who lives there to be working in the settlement. There will obviously be movement in and out, but the objective is to create as many jobs in the settlement as possible as part of the development, so you're reducing long transport times and that. Complete contrast to the Mitchells Plains and the Kailichas and all of the townships that we see across our country. And frankly, how the rest of Africa is done as well. This is a complex diagram, but it's basically showing all of the cash flows that happen from where the investments come from, how it flows through, and then if I did have more time, I would explain sort of how the community benefits from this. About 20% of the profits of the overall system will be fed back into subsidizing health, education, even electricity and water for the poorest in the community, and making sure that there's a good quality of livability and sustainability. Lastly, operation and governance. Yeah, governance is critical. I mean, we're very good at building stuff. We're not as great at looking after stuff. And we therefore recognize that and want to put in place institutional mechanisms to sort that out right from the beginning. So there'll be communications and promotion, residential services, the commercial enterprise side of it, and then the property side of it, and there will be community representation on each and every one of those companies, so that there is really solid governance, maintenance, and management throughout the entire settlement. And using obviously the latest technology that we have access to at any given time. Clearly, that's going to develop as we move, as the 20 years or 25 years unfolds and get more sophisticated. But we are able to take advantage of best of brand, latest technology right from the get-go. I think that is it. And I'm back to you, Marus. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Alastair. I think you're lucky that I couldn't find the unmute button because you went over time a little bit.
I apologize. I should have checked with you to begin with.
No, thank you. Thank you. That was amazing. It's a great development. Maybe you can share the link of the website in the chat box so that everybody can have a look at the website where they can find more information. And I'll definitely share the presentation if you allow that. Let's move on quickly to Romy. There you go. There she is.
Hi. Hi everyone. Thanks so much for being interested in hopefully what I've got to say. All I wanted to share is that it's always much better to come and visit us on site. We do walking tours, and then you can see everything for yourself as it is. So I work for the shareholders of Nando's. I live in the area around Central Kitchen, and in the years driving back and forth to work, I always was noticing all the hotspot dumping and this little insipid stream running behind the Central Kitchen. And I would spend most of my time before COVID working on the Peri Peri farm just outside Maputo that's been turned into an agricultural academy, sort of from a beautification aspect, working alongside the people on the farm, as well as on the border of Swaziland, where there is a malaria indoor spray training, residual spray training center that I used to help clean and make, comfortable for the people who use it for the training. And so when COVID hit, I ended up being more in the area around work. And so the picture you see here is literally where the Jukskei River daylights. And when you come here in real life, it's not for the faint-hearted. And I obviously discourage the kids from looking into it. So what happened was in about 2017, when I went down this rabbit hole with the other very lovely lady called Hanali Kutsia, who I started Water for the Future with at the time, who's an environmental artist. Her and I started to knock on doors and speak to different city departments and read up and speak to various people about where would one start if we wanted to clean the river. I was very lucky finding an article from the Mail Guardian titled "Searching for the Soul of the Jukskei," and that was written by Sean Christie. In that article, he mentioned an old man by the name of Paul Farrell. He was then the chairman of the Jukskei River, and I went to go visit him one afternoon on a Friday, and just to hear more about where would one start and what would one do. And he happened to be wheelchair bound from wading through toxic rivers for so many years. He'd lost some of his toes. And he started to explain to us the extent of this river, and that literally it starts here in Johannesburg and then, travels and changes its name, and it goes via Bruma and Alexandra Township, and then it goes to Hartbeespoort, and later becomes known after, first the crocodile, and then it's the Limpopo, and it literally ends in Shai in Mozambique. It's very interesting also with the watershed going through where Constitutional Hill is. We can literally say that as Johannesburgers, we are intercontinental polluters, with everything on the other side of Con Hill flowing into the Atlantic. In those early days, consulting Paul Farrell, he came up with the idea, or obviously the advice, that we would need to get a clear set of data and reports that we could rely on that could then inform an environmental impact assessment or management plan. And he put together this incredible panel of experts from all over South Africa in various fields. And as he was looking at this river really from a very broad angle, and the people that he put together was covering sectors or subjects such as alien invasives and hydrology, culvert engineer experts, soil, I mean, you name it, riparian and wetland delineation, and all these different wonderful things with most of the words at the time I'd never even heard of, I think. And then obviously there would be a cost involved as to pay for these expert reports that needed to be commissioned, and that was about 300,000. So then I went back to the exco of Nando's and the shareholders of a very interesting and beautiful mixed-use property, the development right next to CK, which is known as Victoria Yards, which I'll talk about a little bit later, and they had those fees. So what we're looking at here is the aerial, a drone shot of literally where the Jukskei daylights, and this, it's on the right-hand side where that street is, that's Queen Street in Lawrenceville, and all the grey roofs to the left, right-hand bottom, the central kitchen, the green roofs at the bottom is a state-owned old age home. And yeah, I always get a bit lost because there's always so much to say when I look at all the images. So what we started to notice from all the research and obviously consulting all the various experts in the city, we got access also to lots of different maps. And we started to notice that if you followed the natural meander of this river, it could be a green corridor. And obviously this would have to have the buy-in of a public-private partnership, in that most of the landowners are a mixture of then privately and publicly owned land. But also what's unique about the area, not to South Africa, but if we say looking at this ecosystem, is that it's a human ecosystem and it's an environmental or natural one. And this area, the people who live here really represent very, very marginalized, like there's many parts of South Africa, the population, and also many different cultures and representing the African diaspora. And yeah, so lots of cultures, lots of languages, and lots of challenges. So it would mean that we'd need to understand very well the aspirations of this community, as well as how they feel about the environment and their connection to the river. So, and excuse my I'm not a graphic designer, so my PowerPoint is also very basic, and I use these for school presentations as well. So the park that's just in front of the daylight point, and for those who don't know what the term daylight refers to with a river, it's when it comes up from underground for the first time and literally sees the light, or, you know, is exposed to the sky and the air. And so there are many eyes or aquifers of the Jukskei River in and around the Doornfontein area. And for those who know this part of Johannesburg, I'm sure you've driven around seeing pipes that are coming out of the basement of some buildings and parking lots, pumping out very fresh and clean water. And a lot of this is from these aquifers, and a lot of basements are flooded. And so when Ellis Park was built back in the day, they used mining rubble and just sort of stuffed it onto some of the main eyes and then built this big stadium. So a few years ago, Haneli Kutsia actually, and one of the permeability and drainage experts, Stuart Dunsmore, who was commissioned by the city of Johannesburg to compile and put together the Upper Jukskei Catchment Management Plan, which we are part of. They, with the JMPD and someone at the head of JRA, walked underground in one of these canals all the way to one of the eyes that is piped up underneath Ellis Park, and took a sample of the water and actually found that it was completely uncontaminated. So almost like finding gold in today's times is this fresh water. But unfortunately, as it comes out of this pipe, it immediately flows and drops into the culvert that was created then as well at the time. And due to the aging infrastructure, for example, one of the main sewage lines from the CBD runs parallel to this culvert, and this is, you know, was probably over 100 years or close to 100 years old. So the sewage is immediately seeping into this fresh water, unfortunately. And then also, as it is canalized, every block is slightly different as it travels down, let's say all the way to Brimmer. Sometimes it's open, sometimes it's closed. And for various reasons, communities are obviously using this to dump various different things, and believe me, have we seen some very interesting things. The image on the right is just a very old sketch of the original farms that were put here. Oh, okay, that's, you know, when there was settlers here. This is one of the many maps that have been found and that we've helped us to understand a lot of interesting things about the natural state of the river. And you can see, so there's two other tributaries. The left-hand side is one that comes from the Kensington Golf Club, and that carries with it a lot of silt into the main stream. And on the right-hand side, that is apparently almost a prehistoric ancient aquifer that starts from Rhodes Park. And if you go there now, there's lots of ducks sitting on a mini island in it. So that's how, and then this main stream is where the big rubble, the macro debris is also coming through. So because there's so many things to consider on where to start and how to fix the river, we've always understood that we've had to keep ongoing to monitor the state of the water. And in the early days, when all those experts then presented their findings, and we had a big presentation where the room was filled with active change makers from the area, other organizations that are doing amazing work like Makers Valley and so forth, and urban farmers, and then there were civil servants, and then all the experts. And we had this long day of everybody just unpacking their findings. And I mean, most people were looking at Hanley and I thinking that we were mad to do such a project, and that, you know, nothing's ever going to change, and really this river is a lost cause, which I think a lot of people still think. But the positive thing that came from that day was that we realized we had a great team of experts that care, who don't necessarily expect money always, that they would like to help, and that the first focus area, and, you know, the project could never really work if we obviously didn't have the community's buy-in, and that the community's voice within all of this is always just as important as any science or data. So also the City of Johannesburg, the Deputy Director of Biodiversity and Open Spaces, Jane Eagle, who's always been such an amazing support to teach us. And I mean, I was so naive in the beginning about all these things, but she put up her hand and she's like, this is all great, but actually, do you know how you can help us? Is the city hasn't understood since the 80s. The data doesn't exist. She said, you know how you can help us is that we haven't had the information of how the headwaters of the Jukskei is, how it behaves. And so Professor Simon Lorenz, the principal hydrologist and who works at SRK, it's a global mining hydrological company, he put up his hand and he said, okay, we'll help and we'll sponsor a flow rate monitor, which would mean, you know, that would enable us to start understanding and monitoring how fast the water is flowing, how the current fluctuates, the base flow, seasonal patterns of rainfall, and all these things. And this is the lovely Ione Lutz on the left-hand side, who and she's also like a urban flooding expert. So we've had many people come together. Dr. Liz Day, an amazing aquatic ecologist who also donated equipment, an ISCO sampler that helps suck the samples out. So this is Tristan Sanele helping her many months of installation and snagging and all sorts of dramas. And this has really taken a few years. And then under the bridge on the right-hand side, we ended up, it's a long story, which I won't go into, but Campbell Scientific, that is a globally renowned scientific instrument manufacturer that make things that measure tornadoes and cyclones. They then ended up sponsoring the state-of-the-art monitoring. It also does wind speed and wind direction and humidity and electronic precipitation and everything. And this has now all come together with, Bureau Veritas laboratories, and they come once a week and they take water samples. So all together, we have this incredible state-of-the-art monitoring station that's all the data is going into a cloud that is going to inform what interventions can be designed, can be installed to help either improve the quality of the water, the flash flooding or any flooding that maybe could occur further downstream, which does happen, and really just inform a lot more, many more decisions, especially for climate change and water scarcity issues. And if we concentrate our efforts in this part, in the valley, in the catchment, it will have a massive win for all the way past Midrand even, which is quite incredible that we've learned from, the studies and the recommendations that Stuart Dunsmore has managed. The thing is, this has taken also so long, so it's been limping along to get it, because to get to this point has really been big forest deal, hustle, sponsorship, and we're almost there that everyone can start using the data and tapping into it properly. But what I'm so grateful for also is finally also the University of Johannesburg has come on board, and they are now going to manage the whole thing, and they've employed a manager, and it's just going to make a huge difference so that everything can be put in its place and so on. So that's one major focus area of the project, is just to keep monitoring. We've had the Water Lab and the Water Research Commission, they were studying COVID during lockdown, and was one of the first places in the country where they saw the Omicron variant. So we have zoologists come and ask to study things. There's a PhD student also studying one of the first in-river macroplastics in Africa. So there's, it doesn't stop, all the students. So we're very grateful, and we want to keep that going. Then the next focus area is the alien invasive removal along the banks of the river, and, where relevant and as much as we can. So this was about 4 years ago and it's the Victoria Yards development, which is, for those who don't know, it's just a really beautiful space that is a combination of urban agriculture, reused buildings, old industrial buildings. This used to be a commercial laundry about 80 years ago. And the developer, Group 44, Brian Green, he came up with the concept of, with artisanal galleries and designer makers, and having a strong link to the community, and so that it's not a bubble, and that jobs that are coming up in this precinct, that always that the locals are considered. And there are so many wonderful and brilliant projects that happen within the space to support the children from the area and women. And again, groups like Makers Valley and Safe Study and Timbuktu in the Valley have all blossomed out of this space, including ourselves. It's really been such a nurturing and inspiring area where we can all just help each other and feed off each other. So we've been focusing our energy as Water for the Future on this part that everyone had their backs towards, behind the first phase of the Victoria Yards, where all these, it was a forest of alien invasives, and we did a public tender, and we hired, which ended up not on purpose, but a women's-led team. And we were able to have this nucleus skilled team. And then we hired youth from the area, like the piece jobs and the day workers through Harambee. So this is after 2 weeks of us removing, according to the sensitivity audit that was done by a wonderful lady called Liesel Vosloo. Really taught me everything I know about alien invasive plants. And it looked like a bomb had gone off after we did this. And if you come here now, it's a completely different place. And we've been rewilding, we've done pocket forests, we've reintroduced indigenous grasslands based on the riparian studies that reference Sekabusrand Nature Reserve. But I'll go into that later on. The Soweto Highveld grasslands are what we're trying to reintroduce, as that's what would have been there before any human intervention. What we also did was we connected, and that's what we try and do with every part of our project as much as possible, especially because of the area that we live in, that we're always trying to connect a learning opportunity or an income generation or creating an SME or something. And so I always love to put this slide in. This was because the sector that processes the biomass of alien invasive plants when you remove, obviously there's different things you can do, weaving, mulching, firewood, and so forth. And this statistic here that 30,000 tons of firewood is sold in metropolitan Johannesburg and Tshwane each month. 70,000 kilograms of briarwood is sold in Gauteng per day in summer. And most of this wood is coming from Namibia and, further afield, obviously rural areas in South Africa. And it's something that we really, as we remove alien invasives, this is the kind of stuff we're doing on the ground, and it's been really encouraging, and people are connecting the dots and starting to get excited because we're also trying to package these jobs, the jobs of the future and environmental jobs, and it's not something to be frowned at. Everyone always thinks that they need to sit behind a laptop to have an important job or in an office, but really, it's actually so much fun and a privilege, and also lovely to be able to work outside and in nature. So it's a lot of sharing of information, and this is why I'm going into the detail here, is that this has been another big focus area of what we do, and then the rewilding and ecological landscaping with everything that's on the land, what we do as we go block by block. So this is now, afterwards, it's so encouraging. I almost feel like we get a thumbs up from nature because the bird species has changed. We did a bird count with SA BirdLife before we did the alien invasive removal. We obviously kept all these big trees with established roots that's in the culvert. The amount of insects and butterflies, and it's really magic. And just walking along the river, listening to the water, it's really beautiful. I mean, obviously you can see some of these trees are exotic as well. There's still, I think, a little tree from heaven sticking its head out on the right-hand side, but yeah, this was also from a couple of years ago. And then again, obviously, all this information, we need to bring it to the people, and everything, any great ideas needs to come from them as well. And no one can tell you better about how it floods when it does, with the flash rain and the summer downpours we have than, the mama and the house of people who are living right there next to that blocked stormwater drain or the infrastructure that's failed, So what happened was, I think 2 years ago, we were very, very lucky in that we were one of 3 organizations that won the Sustainable Together grant from the Guta and the British Council. And it was 100,000 Rand, and we literally made it work for us 10 times over. And we took that money and we just decided that all this data, all this knowledge, everything we've learned, we need to go into this community listen to them and share with them. And we got lots of sponsors like Steel Chainsaw and EnviroServe and you name it. And we just worked very hard and also had a lot of fun. And we did these walking tours with different focus groups. Like the one on the left was various ladies from the area, from the old age home, with local businesses. And so sorry, I might get a bit emotional because when Hanneli left during COVID because she needed to focus more time on her artwork, and so I asked a wonderful woman by the name of Lungile Glatswayo, who really was a voice for the community, to join Water for the Future, and we went down this adventure for months where we would sit with a table at the daylight point, which is not for the faint-hearted, but we would sit there and draw with the kids and make posters and chat to all the adults and their dogs and you name it, and just non-stop. And that's how we really got to learn a lot. And we invited adults for peace jobs and orientation days and things. And I'll tell you now. And so Lungi's passed away a few weeks ago. So it's just a bit of a hard time at the moment because we used to do all these very special things together. So, this is her on the left-hand side. And yeah, we just really went in there. That's the daylight point. That's a government group at the bottom, JDA, speaking to community members about what they would like to see in the park opposite the daylight point when they renovated that. And it's just been, we did such an adventure, really. These are all the schools. Sorry.
Do you want to take a break, Romy?
Sorry, to be too
That's all right. That's all right. Do you want me to put a question to?
I'm almost done. I'm almost done. Sorry.
Okay, cool.
I think it's going to happen to me for a few more months. It just happens. Okay. And yeah, so we did all of these things and with the kids, and she was very, very adamant, you know, that the kids really have to have an opinion and learn these things and tell us what they want and be part of the conversation. And so, yeah, it's just had to be part of this project. And so then the other thing that as I was flipping through, because it's also my presentation, sometimes I do jump around, but what I'm trying to say is, like, there's so many things that still need to come, and the next focus area. So it was always the alien invasive removal and the regeneration of things, and then it's the ongoing monitoring and evaluation, and then the next focus area is the sustainable urban drainage systems, which we refer to as SUDs, and that's obviously about absorbing as much of the water as we can and reusing it and all of that. So this is an area we haven't done a lot of work on, but there's so much potential again. And the picture on the left-hand side is something that we also still did with Hanneli back in the day. We planted this indigenous bush willow into what we've called an eco tree seat. And all it is like you cut open the curb of the street, and it, you know, catches so much of the rainwater that's coming down this valley, and literally where the Jukskei is running is the lowest point. And it's this was the pilot, and you know, it's not perfect, but there's many plans that we have to roll out these, which are super cost effective. You can build them with, you know, rubble, you know, mold. We could have a community competition of different designs. It's also meant to double up as a shaded seating in a public space. And, you know, there's just so much versatility as to how this could be rolled out within the area and make some huge wins. And so this is also just some images that I took from an online presentation from one of my heroes. His name is Nigel Dunnett. He is a very a well-known, an expert. He teaches, what is it? Urban landscaping at Sheffield University. And he's an expert in these beautiful street iterations of how you can play with the concepts of suds. And I always have this dream of, having indigenous grass meadows or flower meadows. And we don't really encourage urban agriculture on the streets because the runoff is so dirty. They get stolen, the trees get pulled out and all that. And flowers are also a higher grossing crop than veggies. So we're looking forward to playing with this a bit more and stuff that's water-wise and, seasonally. It even looks beautiful when it's dying or, the next season is happening. And then the last thing is that we have been encouraging artists since the beginning, thanks to Hanneli, to come and, install something that they feel could talk about these big issues in a playful or interesting and dynamic way. So on the left-hand side is a master's student, Io McCundle, who did her practical on site, and that's made from, this was quite a while ago, and it was rubble that she collected and sand from different parts of the site and embedded it with some of those Soweto high-felt grasses that are almost extinct. Some of the seeds you can only buy now from seed banks. That's how rare it is. So it's eventually going to read as part of the landscape and be this living seed bank. And further to that, and if you walk there now, you won't even imagine that that's what it was, but she was one of the recipients also of the Rupert Art Fund, Social Impact Art Fund. And she did an amazing project with Lungi and the kids, and she called her artwork further the Listening Garden, and she procured all these very rare, also other shrubs and things that's part of the Soweto high-felt grassland biome, and she's planted them and installed beautiful pieces of rock that speaks to what the geology would have been back in the day. So it's very special. And, again, I welcome anyone to come for a walk and see for yourselves. And on the right-hand side is one of Hanneli Kutsia's amazing insect hotels. This is not on our site, but somewhere in Sweden, that she took up alien trees in this forest and then built this beautiful like a wild boar, soch. She calls it the O-soch, I think. I always just love this. I can't wait to do this one day if we could commission her. It could be so wonderful along the Jukskei with something relevant to the, the creatures around our river. And then I'm almost done, maybe a couple of minutes, is, we're always looking abroad also to what other interesting projects work, and this is in Seoul, in Korea, where they developed an old highway that was going through the main part of the city into this beautiful green corridor that also depends on the tides and that, but the amount of people that visit that. And obviously the High Line in New York, the disused railway that was then landscaped and developed. Piet Oldorf is obviously such an amazing gardener, landscaper, guru. So we always get lots of ideas from that. And yeah, I mean, this is a great example of how the value of the property has gone up, and to be conscious of the wrong types of gentrification, and to always include our community in the development, hopefully on the buildings as we go along, as that will happen, as we will see. And then I always put this in cheekily at the end, because we always, as a Section 18A NGO, PBO, we always looking for some support, but we're very lucky in that at the end of last year in December, we were able to apply for the President's Stimulus Fund through the Industrial Development Corporation, and we were able to hire 110 people. So we've got 65 people from our immediate area. We gave another 30 places to the Alexandra Water Warriors, who are downstream from us, and then different groups, 10 here and 10 in Magaliesburg Biosphere, close to Hartbeespoort. And all these people at least can get 2 days a week, 8 days a month. They get 1,484 Rand in their pocket. It's really not a lot, but there's also a little bit of funding for extra training and things. But the difference it's made to these people in their daily lives is incredible. And yeah, if we deliver, then they'll keep extending the program, and at least now also we can really we're scaling out for impact, if I could say it that way. But thanks, that's Water for the Future and where we're at right now.
Thank you, Romy. And if you want to be a little bit more cheeky, you can just copy paste those details into the chat box. And also happy to share your presentation with everyone on the call. So that make sure everybody got it. Thank you so much for both presentations. I think it was I let both of them go over time because I didn't want to, disturb the flow that they were in, and I think both presentations were really great. So I saw earlier on a hand from Lebo, but you put it down. I don't know if you still want to answer or ask your question.
Hello, everybody. It was a mistake.
Okay.
But I wanted to reflect on both presentations as quite futuristic in the thinking. The Cape Town development, I was part of the Cosmos City development way back with Jade Eagle. It was a new concept of doing a multi-use residential development. And I see a refinement of that kind of a concept, which is quite great because it is a fact that we feed off each other. So the notion that the poor must stay away from the rich does not work, in that we need their services. So I think it's great. I also see that there's a lot of thinking around resource efficiency, which must be the fabric of how we do development these days. So that's actually quite awesome. But I'm excited by Romy's presentation. I work for the City of Joburg. I'm the Director, Air Quality and Climate Change. So what she was, this project for me is actually ringing all the bells in terms of what we are trying to do from a city resilience point of view and dealing with the Jukskei. We know the Jukskei River system is a bit of a problem. And we don't always know what to do as a city. We are sort of overwhelmed. So seeing this kind of work and the community participation, I think it's awesome. And I would like to engage further with Romy. I want to also congratulate you and also offer my condolences. We really need people like you to help us as government employees. We do what we can within constraint. As the custodian of the Climate Action Plan for the City of Joburg, we are always seeking this kind of partnerships because we realize that the Climate Action Plan is not a plan of the city, but it's a plan of the jurisdiction of the city of Johannesburg and everyone that lives in it. So I'm actually quite excited and chuffed with this. So from an adaptation resilience point of view, I would like to engage further with you. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you, Lebo. Awesome to have you on the call as well. It's great to have people from the cities on the call as well. And the collaboration happens there. Marty, I saw your hand going up and down.
I was also just experimenting there with the controls, but when Lebo said that her hand was accidental, I don't think so. She had lots to add, and I'm so glad that she accidentally put her hand up. Well done, Lebo.
Great. So for next month, we normally have our webinars on the last Thursday of the month, but next month that's very close to a public holiday, and probably nobody will pitch on a Thursday afternoon if Friday is a public holiday. So we're doing it a week early. So the next one is in I think in 3 weeks already. Yeah. So that's going to be about happy and healthy buildings, and we have 2 speakers. We'll be talking about how productivity, how we can make buildings more productive, or how people can be more productive in buildings, and also about circadian lighting. Then in May, we're planning a webinar around timber construction and how that's developing in South Africa. And in June, I want to do something around net zero waste and, have a discussion around how we're dealing with waste. If you have a topic, again, just let us know. We are really grateful for all your input. And then again, if you have any ideas for sponsors for our webinars, we would really like to keep them going, but we can't keep them going if we don't get the sponsorship. So if you have any ideas or the company you're working for, please let us know, and we'll be in touch. And then lastly, a big thank you to both our speakers, Alastair and Romy. Really enjoyed both presentations, and I think it was very valuable and very informative. And I know both of you have a really great website on both the projects, so we can find more information there, and I will also be sharing it. And then last, if you've missed any of our previous events, you can look them back on the GreenNet website, and we're also thinking of starting a YouTube channel where you can access the recordings of these webinars. And then lastly, I want to thank everyone for attending. Thank you for taking the time out and contributing to the chat and everything. So thank you very much, and I hope you have a lovely evening and hope to see you next month. Great.